1 guinea for the flooded dye house. That was the widow's whole bid, and the laughter began before the words were done. $4 Spanish, Josiah Crane told the clothiers at his elbow, loud enough for the whole square to have it. That is what her guinea comes to on a Bristol wharf. She bids a sailor's pocket for a drowned house. Ashcombe Market Square was full that morning. Wool wagons stood on the cobbles, the church clock had just struck 10, and the parish clerk was up on a cart with his papers, selling off the old riverside dye house for its arrears and charges. He had read the notice twice. Water standing in the vats. The wheel fouled. The lower course still dark from the spring flood. No man had bid. Then the small woman in the dark shawl had lifted her hand, and now every face in the square was turned toward her, and most of them were grinning. Tabitha Reed stood very straight under the weight of it, 54 years old, a widow since January, with a drawstring purse in her hand that held everything the law had left her. She did not look at Crane. She looked at the clerk. "You heard the notice, madam," the clerk said, not unkindly. "It goes as it stands, water and all. The parish makes no promise of it." "I heard it read twice," she said. 1 guinea. I stand by it." "Her husband's debts ate the cottage and both looms," a woman said behind her, in the voice people use when they mean to be overheard. "Now the river can eat the rest." Crane came forward then, easy in his good blue coat, and he spoke to the square more than to her. "Mrs. Reed, I factored your husband's cloth for 20 years, and I will say this much for his memory. Edmund Reed never threw a shilling in the river. His widow means to throw 21 of them in at one go." The laughter came again, warmer this time, and crueler for being warm. "Keep your guinea, missus, buy bread with it. You will be begging the vestry to take that swamp back by Michaelmas." "By Michaelmas," Tabitha said, "and nothing else." She said it the way a woman closes a gate. The clerk looked over the square. "Is there any other bid?" There was not. There was only the pleasure of the crowd, which costs nothing and offers nothing. Then at 1 guinea, to the widow Reed, as it stands, water and all. The hammer was a cooper's mallet, and it came down on the cart rail with a crack that sent the pigeons up off the church roof. She counted the coin into the clerk's hand. 21 shillings, counted slow, some of it in sixpences, while the square watched. When it was done, she had 9 shillings left in the purse, and a paper with wet ink naming her the owner of a dye house full of river. 9 shillings and a swamp, Crane said to the clothiers, shaking his head. "Every parish keeps one fool. Gentlemen, ours at least buys her ruin honestly." She walked out of the square with the paper folded against her, and the crowd parted in front of her and closed behind her, murmuring. At the mouth of the lane a very old man stood leaning on a hazel stick, watching her come. His hands, folded on the head of the stick, were stained a deep and settled blue. He did not laugh at her. He looked at her a long moment, touched his hat, and said nothing at all. She noticed the hands. She was too tired to wonder about them. That came later. Before we go any further, if stories like this one mean something to you, take 1 second, tap subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from tonight. It costs nothing, like the crowd's laughter, and it keeps the lamp lit on stories like Tabitha's. Now, back to the lane below the town. Because the hammer had fallen, and the widow had just bought the town joke with her last guinea. They had buried Edmund Reed in the 2nd week of January, with the ground like iron and the river running high past the churchyard wall. 32 years married. He was a weaver with a fine hand and a slow smile, who worked 2 looms in the long cottage on the hill and sold his cloth through Josiah Crane. He died at 57, between one throw of the shuttle and the next, and the doctor said his heart had simply finished, quiet as a clock. She had thought she knew every corner of their life. Then the guildmen came with their book. Debts, 55 pounds of them, borrowed small and steady against the guild fund, quarter after quarter, for 7 years. No note anywhere in the cottage said where the money had gone. Not drink. Edmund had no taste for it. Not cards. He was in his bed by 9 every night of his working life. Josiah Crane sat warden of the guild fund, and the fund did not ask what a dead man had wanted with the money. It wanted the money back. The cottage sold, the loom sold with it, and the dresser, and the 8-day clock. 56 pounds and 10 shillings, the whole of a marriage, counted onto a table by men in black coats. When the debt was cleared, there were 30 shillings left. Tabitha Reed went to lodge in the little room over the chandler's shop, with a bed, a box, and her grandmother's iron-bound trunk, which was worth nothing, and so was left to her without argument. The town said the debts shamed him. She would not take the word. But at night she lay in the narrow bed and asked the dark the one question she could not ask him. 7 years, Edmund. Where did it go? The dye house stood a quarter-mile below the town, where the river bent wide under the hill. Gray dressed stone, 2 stories and a tall square chimney, built when the wool trade built things to outlast the men who paid for them. The mill race ran beneath 3 low arches along its flank, and the spring flood had gone through the lower course and left its mark on the stone like a dirty ribbon. The tenter yard was grown to nettles. The doors had swollen shut, and when she forced the small one by the race, the smell that came out was river mud and old iron. And under both of those, faint and stubborn, the ghost of 40 years of matter. Inside, 3 great oak vats stood brim full of dead water. The copper furnace wore green. Light came through the broken panes and lay in long bars across the wet flags, and somewhere under the floor she could hear water moving with nowhere to go. Why she had bid, she could not have said in the square. She could have said it here. She had stood in this room at 7 years old, holding her grandmother's apron, and watched a hank of wool go down into darkness and come up burning. Dorcas Ray had been mistress of the color at these vats, in the years when ashcombe cloth took its red from her hands and no others. The guild had put her out at the last. Tabitha had been 15 the day her grandmother came up the hill with her aprons in a basket, and never once looked back at the river. Some said the old woman had cursed the house. She had not. She had only stopped speaking of it, entirely, to the end of her life. The iron-bound trunk had come down to Tabitha through her mother, and in all her married years she had never once gone through the bottom of it. She did now, by candlelight, in the little room over the chandler's shop. Under the linens lay a dyer's apron, folded square, its hem stained a red that 40 years had not dimmed, and pinned to the apron a scrap of paper carrying 4 words in a small, even hand. For Tabitha. Her hands. She sat with it on her knees until the candle guttered. 3 days later the vestry posted the sale of the dye house, and she walked past the notice 3 times, and on the 4th walking her feet turned down the lane of their own accord. On the furnace room's high shelf, under a fur of dust, Tabitha found 2 things: a storm lantern of heavy amber glass, its wick sound, its font still smelling faintly of oil, and cut into the keystone of the furnace arch, small and clean, a flower of 4 petals. Madder bloom, her grandmother's mark, set where a mason sets his own. She stood a long while with her thumb in the cut of it. That first evening she trimmed the wick, filled the lantern from the chandler's can, and set it burning on the sill of the south window. The light it gave was the color of cider held up to a candle. It reached across the wet flags and up the flank of the nearest vat, and the old room gathered itself around it, and for the first time since January the place looked like something other than a grave. She slept in the loft over the drawing room, wrapped in her shawl, and before she slept she opened a school notebook, ruled it into columns, and began a ledger of the house. Room by room, in a small, even hand. What each one wanted. What each would cost. Where the water stood, and where, strangely, it did not. The bailing began the next morning, and did not end for 11 days. She had no pump. She had a kitchen bucket, a borrowed sump scoop, and 2 arms that had wrung sheets for 30 years. She carried the river out of her house, 1 bucketful at a time, up the steps, across the yard, back into the race, while the herons watched her from the far bank like churchwardens. At the town well on the Monday, the market women were waiting for her. "You could keep eels in your parlor, Mrs. Reed," one said, and the others laughed into their collars. "The factor gives it till first frost," said another. "He says the roof will lie down in the river of its own accord, and save the parish the pulling of it." "Then the parish may thank me for a cheap entertainment," Tabitha said. She drew her water and walked back down the lane with her back straight and her arms shaking. Not every voice in the town was a flint. On the 4th evening, the chandler's wife came down from the town carrying a covered basin and stood at the yard gate as if unsure of her welcome. "Barley broth," she said. "It wanted eating, and my husband says you bought oil and wick off him and never asked a penny of credit. That counts for something in this town, whatever the square thinks it knows." "The square says I am a fool," Tabitha said, taking the basin in both hands for the warmth of it. "The square said the same of my husband when he bought the shop. Men who laugh in squares go home to houses their fathers paid for." The chandler's wife nodded at the dark hulk behind them. "My mother bought her scarlet thread at this door, when there was scarlet in this valley. She always said a bride was not dressed without a thread of it. Eat that while it is hot." And she went back up toward the town, quick and stout, before she could be thanked. On the Thursday, Josiah Crane rode down the towpath with 2 clothiers, and the 3 of them sat their horses at her gate like men at a fair. "Still bailing the river with a kitchen bucket, Mrs. Reed? It comes in faster than you carry it out. Rivers do." She tipped her bucket into the race and straightened. "Then I will carry faster." "I will tell you what I will do," Crane said, in the reasonable voice that was worse than the laughter. £5 for the stone. This day silver in your hand. The house is worth nothing, but the ashlar would square a bridge footing handsomely. £5, you are quit of your folly, and the town says the widow made a profit on the parish. That is a better story than the one they are telling now. "The house is not for sale, Master Crane." "Nothing here is for sale," he said, gathering his reins. "That is the trouble, missus. There is nothing here at all." The clothiers laughed their 2 dutiful laughs, and the horses carried them up toward the town, and the river went on pushing at her floor. But the house had begun to tell her things, in the manner of houses. In the furnace room's far corner, where the flags dipped, the standing water was not brown. It rose cold and clear, and it tasted of stone, not of river. She marked the corner in her notebook with a question against it. Every other puddle in the building was the flood's leavings. That one corner was something else, and it did not fall with the rest. And there was the old man. He came along the towpath of an evening, the man with the blue-stained hands, and stood at the gate and watched, not idly. He watched her work as a foreman watches, counting what she did right. On the 9th evening he came through the gate without asking, walked the length of the race with his stick, and stopped at the sluice gate at its head. He ran his hand along the frame, slow, like a man reading in the dark. "Whoever told you the flood stove this gate in," he said, "told you wrong. This gate was wound open, missus, wound full open, and the pin hung back on its nail, neat as church. A flood breaks things. It does not tidy up after itself." She stood with the bucket dripping against her skirt. Opened. Who would open a sluice on an empty house? The old man looked at the water a while. "Ask the house," he said, and touched his hat, and went away up the towpath into the dusk. If you've made it this far into Tabitha's story, you already know she does not turn back easily. Do one small thing before the vat's warm. Tap subscribe. Because what this house has been keeping all these years, and who it has been keeping it for, is the part I have been waiting to tell you. He came back at first light with 2 buckets of his own and a coil of rope over his shoulder. "Silas Hartwell," he said, as if that settled matters. "Journeyman at these vats, man and boy, when your grandmother was mistress of the color. I ground her matter. I kept her furnace. You will want a man who knows where the drains run. I cannot pay a man's wage. I can pay a shilling a week and dinner. Dinner is mostly potatoes. I have eaten worse out of better kitchens," Silas said, and set down his buckets, and that was the whole of the hiring. He did know where the drains ran. He knew the culverts under the yard that had silted shut, and he knew which one to rod first, and when it cleared, half the standing water in the lower course went out with a sound like a long sigh. He found the willow limb fouling the wheel, and got it free with the rope and an afternoon's patience. He showed her the sump under the furnace room floor, an old stone lined well in the corner she had marked with a question, where the clear water rose. "The old sump," he said, "and no more." "Why does its water run cold and clear?" she asked, "when everything else in this house is river?" "Old work," said Silas, "deeper than the river." And he moved the talk elsewhere, the same as he did whenever her questions walked too near something, and she noticed it, and said nothing yet. The girl came on a rainy evening in the 3rd week. 16, perhaps, with a bundle on her back and her boots worn through at the sides, standing at the gate in the wet. "I can card and I can spin and I can carry," the girl said. "I will work for bread. My father was a weaver over the hill. The guild sold his loom in the spring." "The same black coats," Tabitha said. "What is your name?" "Peg, missus." "Then come in, Peg, bread first. Then work, if you want it. That is the rule of this house." She had not known it was the rule of the house until she heard herself say it. Some rules arrive before their reasons do. Peg slept in the loft over the drawing room and was up before either of them, and it turned out she could figure as well as Carrie. She took over the tally in the school notebook, chalked the days on the drawing room door, and guarded both like a small customs officer. At supper that first evening, the girl ate like a stove, and then stopped, ashamed, halfway down the second bowl. "I can go on to Bristol if I am a burden," she said. "There is spinning work in the big sheds there, they say." "Who says?" "The woman at the toll gate. She said a girl alone had best keep walking." Tabitha filled the bowl again. The woman at the toll gate never kept a house with 3 vats in it. "Eat. Tomorrow you will learn the difference between carding for a cottage and carding for a trade, and by dark you will wish yourself back on the road." Peg did not wish herself back on the road. Peg stayed. The house had a rule now, and the rule had a face. By midsummer the vats stood empty and scoured, the wheel turned, and the furnace drew. Tabitha bought madder and alum on the chandler's credit, mordanted a pound of fleece, and made her first bath by what her hands half remembered from a childhood 40 years gone. The wool came up a dull brick, dirty at the tips, nothing any weaver would pay for. She stood over the basin a long time. "Matter is honest," Silas said from the doorway. "It gives what it is asked. You are not asking right yet. Then teach me the asking." "Some of it I may," he said. "The vat, the blue, the black, those I may teach you. Some of it is not mine to give." And he banked the furnace for the night, careful as a man closing a book. The blue came first. Silas built the vat the old way, woad and indigo together, bran to feed it, kept blood warm day and night like a beast in a stall. It was a live thing, and it had moods. It wanted feeding of an evening. It wanted quiet in the morning. When it was ready, a coppery flower gathered on its surface, and Silas looked at that flower the same morning 3 days running before he would let a single hank go down. The first one came up green as pond weed, and Peg made a sound of pure disappointment. Then the air got at it, and the green began to turn, slow as an opinion changing, and inside 2 minutes she was holding blue. Deep, even, sound blue, the blue of a jay's wing in shadow. "It goes in green," Peg whispered, "and the air turns it." "The vat does its work below," Silas said. "The air keeps its word above. Remember both halves, and you will not go far wrong in this trade, nor much else." 2 weavers from over the hill brought their yarn within the fortnight. Men outside the reach of the town's paper, who paid in coin at the back gate and did not care what a factor thought of the house that dyed it. The blues held through fulling, and the word walked over the hill by itself. Quiet, in the manner of good word. Crane heard it too. On the next market day he stood on the steps of the wool hall with his ledger under his arm and said his piece loud enough for the stalls to carry it. "Hear me plain, gentlemen. Cloth off the widow's vats I do not factor. I will not send puddle water to London with my name on the bale. Her color will fly by the first fulling, and every house that touches it will be remembered for it." By Saturday, the elder of her 2 weavers had sent his boy down the towpath with the shilling he owed and his cap in his hand. "Father says he is sorry, missus. He says Master Crane holds his notes, and a man cannot weave against his own paper. Tell your father he owes this house nothing," she said, "and tell him the gate stays open. Paper wears out faster than walls." She counted the money that evening at the bench. The blue had brought in shillings, and the shillings went out again as fast as they came. Matter and alum on the chandler's book, oil for the lamp, bread, Silas's wage. The arithmetic bent thin, and autumn stood behind it, patient as a creditor. So she tried the scarlet. It was the color the house had been famous for, the color she had seen drawn at 7 years old. And it was the only coin she owned that Josiah Crane could not match, if she could mint it. She mordanted the wool with alum, made her madder bath, kept it low and slow, did everything her hands half remembered. The hank came up a hard rust, ugly at the tips. She tried again with fresher root and a longer steep. Worse, the color of an old kettle, and the whole week's shillings gone into it. That evening she set the ruined hank on the bench where Silas sat mending a hay-rake, and she made herself say the words, which cost her more than the wool had. "You stood at my grandmother's shoulder at these vats. You know the scarlet. I have watched you not know it since midsummer, and I am done pretending otherwise. Give me the working, Silas." He set the rake down and looked at the rusty wool for a long moment. "I swore an oath, missus, to a dying woman, with my hand on the thing itself. It is not mine to break, not for pity and not for potatoes." "An oath on what thing? Sworn to whom?" "When the house says you are ready," he said, rising, "you will not need me to tell you anything at all. Then I will find it without you, she said, and the words came out with all her pride in them, and she was sorry before the door had shut behind him. She stood alone with the lamp and the ruined Hank. There is a thing to swear on, then, she said to the empty room. Whose is it? The room did not answer. Below the floor the cold spring rose in its old stone throat, saying what it had always said, too quietly to be understood. 9 weeks to Michaelmas, Peg chalked on the drawing-room door, because the square had given them a date, and Tabitha meant to keep the appointment. Those weeks were work from bell to bell. They scoured the coppers till the metal came back rosy, swept the chimney, and burned the first true furnace fire the house had held in 15 years. The carrier who brought the matter stood in the yard watching the smoke go up straight. First time in 15 years I have seen that chimney draw, he said. My father hauled to this door when I was a boy. It is good to smell a furnace on this water again. They mowed the tenter yard and rebuilt the racks in larch, and the first cloth went out on them white, for the bleaching, like washing, hung by a giant. The grocer's wife stopped her on the bridge. I see your amber light of an evening, coming home from my sister's. Time was the old place frightened the children, Mrs. Reed. Now they wave at it. Late in the summer, a second-hand copper came up at a mill sale beyond the hill, and she bought it for 11 shillings and carted it home herself, the town watching it go down her lane the same as it had once watched her guinea. The chandler's book was paid down to nothing before the equinox. Piece by piece, the trade was coming back up the river to the house that had taught the valley the trade in the first place. And the blues held. A young clothier from beyond the far bridge, well outside the reach of the factor's paper, came himself and turned the hanks over in the light for a quarter of an hour. If your color holds the fulling, missus, I will bring you my whole clip come autumn, he said. And I will tell you a thing for nothing. Master Crane talks about this house too often for a man who believes what he says about it. At the town well, the market women made room for her bucket now. The one who had promised her eels in the parlor turned a hank of the blue over in her hands one Monday and did not quite give it back. My daughter marries at harvest end, she said, gruff about it. If I brought you wool of my own spinning, could you make me this blue? I can pay in eggs and honest silence. The eggs will do, Tabitha said. This town was never silent in my lifetime, and I have given up asking it to be. The woman laughed, surprising them both, and after that the lane saw more traffic than the bridge. On market Saturdays, she put 1 coin into a stoneware jar on the furnace room shelf, whatever the week had been. Her grandmother had kept such a jar on that same shelf, and the memory arrived with the habit. Keep a little back, Dorcas used to say, for the one who comes with nothing. Tabitha had come with a guinea. Peg had come with a bundle and worn-through boots. The jar filled slowly, and she never counted it, on principle. The chandler, whose credit had fed the vat since spring, offered once to write to his cousin, a mercer at Bristol, who might take blue worsted by the piece. We will manage, she said, quick, before the kindness had even finished being spoken. Walking home, she heard herself say it again, and knew it for what it was, pride, wearing thrift's apron. The house had taught her many things by then. It had not yet taught her to hold out her hand. Silas took his shilling each Saturday, grave as a man taking sacrament. And each Saturday evening, before he went up the towpath, he walked the length of the race to the sluice and stood a while at the gate he had once called Nita's church, with his palm flat on the frame, in the attitude of a man at a headstone. She watched him from the yard and did not ask. There were 2 silences in that house by then, hers and his, and they nodded to each other in passing. 6 weeks to Michaelmas, the rains came early. 3 days of it off the hills, and the river rose brown and fast until it stood at the arches and pushed. But this year the race was clear. The culverts ran, and the sluice gate was wound down hard on its sill, with clay packed against the boards. The meadows drowned all the long valley to the far bridge. The dye house kept its floor dry as a Sunday parlor. Whole valley under water, and your flag's dry, the carrier said, when the road opened again. There is a joke in that somewhere, missus, but I cannot find the shape of it. The spring flood had left one wound they had put off dressing. Along the north wall of the furnace room, the plaster had cracked and bellied where the water had stood against it. And with the rains done, Tabitha resolved to strip and shore it before the true autumn damp arrived. She went at the loose sheet with a trowel, and a whole face of plaster the height of a door came away at once, and she stepped back, coughing lime dust into her apron. Behind it was not rubble. Behind it was dressed slate, set tight and true as a hearth, work no flood could touch, and no eye was ever meant to find. And low in the middle of that facing was a recess the size of a bread oven's mouth, dry as a chapel within, and in the recess sat a tin box, and beside the box a parcel wrapped in oilcloth, tied around twice with tarred cord. "Missus," Peg said, very quiet, holding up the amber lantern so the light fell into the wall. "The wall is finished behind. Someone built this. Someone meant it." "Not to be found," said a voice from the doorway. "To be kept." Silas Hartwell stood there with the rain still on his shoulders, and he was not surprised, not by any of it. He looked at the opened wall as a man looks at a grave he has tended half his life. 39 years I have walked past that wall and kept my eyes off it, he said. "Set them on the bench, missus, and turn the lamp up. You will want the light for this." She untied the tarred cord and unwrapped the oilcloth, and the lamplight fell on a book, calf-bound, thick as a brick, its boards a little warped from 40 years of wall. She opened it, and the furnace room went very quiet, because the hand on the pages was small and even, the very hand that had taught her own to write. Recipes, page upon page of them, the greens, the blacks, the vat and its feeding, the whole craft of the house set down plain, and at the center, ruled off from all the rest, the pages she had not dared hope for. She read them aloud, because they wanted to be read aloud. Matter for the body of it. Grain for the fire. Tin to bind the light. Oil and bran to make the wool willing. 8 days, and no shortening them. And beneath that, underscored twice by a hand pressing hard, "No water in this county will carry this color, but the spring under this floor. Soft as rain and cold as charity. The river ruins it, the spring makes it." "Now you know what the old sump is," Silas said quietly. "Her water. The house's own, out of the hill. The river never touched it, and never could. The tin box held papers, receipts, scores of them, on the vestry's own forms, signed by the vestry clerk, each one for the keeping and charges of the old dye house, and every last one made out against the same name. Edmund Reed. Peg, who was quickest at figures, laid them out in rows by lamplight, and worked her lips over the sums. 13 pounds of old arrears, cleared in the first year, she said at last. Then 30 shillings the quarter, 7 years together. That comes to 55 pounds, missus, to the shilling. 55 pounds. The sum that had eaten the cottage, the looms, the dresser, the clock. The sum the guild had called a dead man's carelessness. 7 years of quiet quarters, and every one of them had gone down the hill to hold a roof over 3 cold vats and a spring. At the bottom of the box lay a letter, begun and not finished, the ink gone brown. To my wife. When the vestry tires of holding the old house, I mean to buy it, and set you before your grandmother's vats, where I first saw you with matter on your hands. If the debts fright you when I am gone, know they were the price of a door I could not yet open. Forgive me the silence. I wanted to bring you a finished thing. The pen had stopped there. Tabitha sat down on the bench because her legs decided it for her. She read the letter twice more. Then she folded it small and put it away inside her bodice, and it did not leave her keeping again. "Say the rest," she said to Silas. "All of it. You have carried it long enough." He sat and turned his blue hands over and set it to the open wall as much as to her. "Your grandmother sealed that wall with her own trowel, the winter the guild put her out. The clothiers wanted her receipts sold along with the lease, and she would not sell. She said the color was not the guild's to buy. It was her mother's, and hers, and it would belong to her blood or to nobody. She made me swear, with my hand on that book, that no hand but her blood's would open the wall, and that while I lived no stranger would take this house whole." And in March, Tabitha said, "The sluice." Edmund died with the keeping half paid, and the vestry posted the sale. There was a Bristol man asking after the ashlar, wanting the house broken for a bridge footing. "I am an old man, missus. I had no £50 to bid. I had a sluice key and a dark night. So I drowned your grandmother's house to make it worthless, so that it would still be standing whole when her blood came down the lane. If a reckoning is owed for that, name it, and I will pay it. Did my husband know you? The keeping, the wall, did you two ever? We spoke of it once, and once only. He came down 1/4 day, 7 years back, when the vestry talked of pulling the place down, and after that the talk stopped, and I saw receipts change hands at the church door of a quarter morning. I never asked, and he never said. 2 men keeping one secret apiece, and both secrets were you." "What did she say at the end?" Tabitha asked. "You were there." The old man was quiet so long the lamp had time to gutter and right itself. She had the book under her hands on the blanket, the last night. She said the guild had taken her vats, but the color was in the blood, and blood keeps. And then she said, "The little one has the hands. I saw her at the matter when she was 7. If ever she comes back to the water, give her mine." He looked up. "You were the little one, missus. I have waited 39 years to learn whether the water would call you back. And in the end it took a flood of my own making to do it. I am sorry for the wall I kept from you, and I am not sorry I kept it. Both are true, and I am too old to untangle them." "There is nothing to untangle," she said. "You kept faith. That is the rarest wool in this county, and it has never once flown the color." She looked from the old man to the opened wall, and she said the truest thing she had said all year. "Half a year I have been too proud to ask help of a single soul in this valley, and the whole time help was sworn into a wall and paid up quarterly at the church door." On the last page of the book, in a larger, shakier hand, the hand of the end of a life, 3 lines stood alone. "Keep a little back for the one who comes with nothing. Keep the lamp in the south window while the vat works. Color is only light that agreed to stay." They began the next morning. 8 days, the book said, and they gave it 8 days, not an hour less. The oil steeped first, and the bran water. The fleeces turned morning and evening until the wool went willing as cloth. The alum and the spirits of tin weighed out on the chandler's scale to the scruple. The matter ground fresh, and the little paper of grain that cost more than everything else in the bath together, weighed like physic. And the water, always the water, drawn cold and bright from the old sump, not one pail of river in the whole working. Every evening while the wool worked, the amber lamp stood lit at the south window, because the book said so, and neither of them called it superstition, and neither ever skipped it. On the 8th evening, Silas banked the furnace and stood a long moment with his hand on the copper's rim. "Tomorrow, before light," he said. "The color likes the cold." They came down in the dark with one lantern between them, mist standing on the race, the sky just going gray over the hill. Peg held the light high. Silas turned the windlass, and the first skein came up out of the copper, dripping and steaming. It was not rust. Scarlet is a thin word for what hung on that pole. It was ember and rosehip, the red at the heart of a fire that means to burn all night, and in the half-dark it looked lit from within. Silas looked at it and said nothing for a long count. "That is her red," he said at last. "That is the red they put out of this house 39 years ago." Tabitha did not weep. She laughed, once, short and clear, like a girl. They were not fools about it. They boiled a cutting in soap water a full hour, as hard a scouring as any fuller would give it, and the color kept faith. They pegged a length on the tenters through near a fortnight of sun and rain, and it kept faith. They washed a hank in the river itself, out of something close to spite, and the river handed it back unchanged. Silas cut the boiled strip in two and pressed half of it flat between the back pages of the book, the first proof of the red come home, and nobody called that foolishness either. The color was fast. It was real. It was hers. 3 weeks before Michaelmas she went up to the market with the trial piece the young clothier had woven from her wool, and with a plan for the man she knew would be waiting. The piece went over the rail by the wool hall steps, and the crowd came to it as iron comes to a magnet. Clothiers put their thumbs to the weave. Women touched the corner of it and looked at their own hands after, as if the red might have come off, as if it were coals. Crane came through the crowd with his ledger under his arm. "Puddlewater, gentlemen, with its Sunday face on," he said. "Very handsome this morning. It will fly by the first fulling. I have said so since June, and I say it now." "The kettle, Peg," Tabitha said. They had brought the brazier ready lit. Before the whole square Peg set the kettle on, shaved the soap in, and brought it to a rolling boil, and Tabitha cut a strip from the piece with her own scissors, and gave it to the water for as long as it took the church clock to ring the half and the hour. Then she drew it out with the tongs, rinsed it at the trough, and laid it flat on white paper on the rail, and stood back so that everyone could see. The scarlet had not moved, not a shade. The paper under it stayed white as a collar. The square had gone so quiet that the trough could be heard filling. Then an old shepherd at the rail said, to nobody in particular, "I mind that red. My mother had a cloak of it. Married in it, churched in it, buried in it. I never thought to see it again this side of the ground." And the noise came back all at once, the whole market talking together, and this time it was not laughter. "Then it is bought color," Crane said, and it came out louder than he meant. "Some London lot, rebaled with her mark on it. There is no scarlet in this county. There has been none since the old woman died." Silas Hartwell stepped out of the crowd and up onto the second step where the square could see him. "There is one man here old enough to call that by its name," he said. "I ground the matter and I stirred that vat with these two hands, on this river, in this parish. Near 60 years I have dyed wool in this valley. I saw this red drawn once before, at Dorcas Ray's vat, from her book and her water, and I have waited half my life to see it again. It has come home, gentlemen. Whether one factor likes it is the smallest question in the county." Crane turned to the clothiers, and his voice found its old iron. "Weave it who likes. Whoever weaves her color finds no factor in me. and no road to London. Then they will find one in me. The man who said it had been standing at the piece the whole while, with his thumb on the weave, a stranger in a plain good coat, and the square went quiet around him. I buy for 2 houses in London that have wanted a fast bright scarlet these 5 years past. I have stood at this rail a quarter of an hour, listening to a county tell itself it has nothing. I will take every pound the lady can die by spring at 1/3 above the factor's rate, and my houses will ask for more. Who is her factor? The house has no factor, Tabitha said. It has a gate, and the gate has a queue, and any man may stand in it. That evening, with the lamp lit and the supper on the table, there came a knock. Peg opened the door and stood very still. Josiah Crane was on the towpath in the last of the light, alone, holding his hat in both hands. "Mrs. Reed," he said, "I will not keep you from your supper. You have kept me from a great deal more in your time, Master Crane. Say your piece." He turned the hat by its brim. "My London houses have heard of your scarlet. 3 letters this week, and each one asks why the county's factor has none of it, and each one will go around me if I cannot answer. I am here to buy dye lots. Name your terms. You have earned the right to make them hard." "The terms are posted on the gate," she said. "The price is the price. Coin at the gate. First come, first served. The gate opens at 7. The queue forms on the towpath. You will want to come early. Market mornings are busy. That is all. No harder terms for me than for any carter in the parish." "You called my work puddle water in the open square," she said. "I will not make you eat the word. Words are poor eating, and the river has been kinder to me than words ever were. The price is the same for every man. That is the hardest term I know, and you will find it hard enough." He stood a moment in the dusk. "Your husband," he said, £55, and I called him careless before the guild, because I could not make the sum come out any other way. What was it? What did I miss?" "He was buying me a door," she said. Crane looked at her, and at the amber light behind her, and something in his face shut and opened again. "Then I factored a better man's cloth than I knew," he said, and put on his hat and went up the towpath in the dark. On Michaelmas morning the lane was full before the mist lifted. Pack horses nose to tail down the towpath, a wagon at the gate, weavers with yarn on their backs, and clothiers' men with orders in their pockets, and Peg at the gate on a stool with the tally book on her knees, entering names in a hand that had grown proud of itself. Josiah Crane came at 6:30 and stood the queue like any other man, 3rd from the gate, and she sold to him at the posted price, and neither of them said the word guinea. A carter, waiting his turn, looked down the queue, and then at her, and rubbed the back of his neck. "There are men in this line who laughed in the spring, missus. I was one of them. Then it cost you nothing, and it costs you nothing now," she said. "Mind the step as you come in. It is worn. It was a busy house once, and it means to be again." The young clothier brought his whole clip, as promised, and news with it. "There is not a loom from here to the far bridge that is not throwing your color one way or another, missus. Every loom in the county runs your wool now. My weavers ask for the vat by name. They say, 'Give us the widow's red,' as if there were no other red in England." Before noon the vestry clerk came down the lane with his papers under his arm, the same man whose mallet had cracked on the cart rail in the spring. "In the spring this house sold for a guinea, because no man would own it," he said. "I am instructed to rate it now among the mills, and it will stand near the highest-rated house on this water. I thought you had better hear that from me, and not from the town." At the gate he paused and spoke lower. I signed your husband's receipts these 7 years, missus, and held my tongue, because he asked it of me. I am glad the roof he kept is keeping his wife. She paid the rates a year forward that same afternoon, so that no bill of arrears would ever again stand against this house on a cart in the square. That evening she took the stoneware jar down from the furnace room shelf and set it in Peg's hands, jar and all, uncounted, your wages and past wages, and the tally book is yours for good. Keeper of the books of this house. And the first rule stands as long as the walls do. Bread first, for whoever comes to this gate with nothing. Then work, if they want it. You keep the rules now. By the furnace fire she set the calf-bound book into Silas's stained hands. You kept it 39 years. Hold it whenever you like. You never named my sentence, he said, for the flood. Here it is. The lamp, every working evening for as long as we both last. You will light it, or I will, and the door stays on the latch behind it. That is the whole of your sentence, Silas Hartwell. Hard labor, the old man said, and the nearest thing to a smile they ever got from him crossed his face. I have carried worse. Outside, the scarlet on the tenters went gray as the dusk came down, and then the lamp came up in the south window and gave the wool back its fire, and the light lay out across the water, where the whole town could see it from the bridge. She stood at the gate a while, with her shawl about her, a small, straight figure between the river and the house. She was not rich, though the money came now and did not stop. What she was certain. Certain of the water under the floor, of the 2 names that had kept her out of the dark, and of a lamp that would be lit tomorrow, whether the town watched or not. Would you have spent your last guinea on a drowned house the whole town laughed at, or kept it safe in your pocket and walked on by? Tell us in the comments where you are watching from tonight, and what you would have done in that square. And if Tabitha's lamp warmed your evening, tap subscribe before you go, so the next story can find you when it is told. Good night.